Welcome to AP US History. We are going to be exploring some ideas in chapter 21 or 20. Uh, the first topic that we're going to talk about is populism, how that came about. Uh, Populism really is a grassroots movement that took place in the West, organizing farmers against big business, particularly the railroads. Uh, During the Gilded Age, during the last half of the 19th century, farmers faced a lot of problems, not only just natural problems, but also economic problems. There was a shortage of money. It was hard to get bank loans. Railroads charged exorbitant rates to haul their grain and livestock and other produce to market. They were looking for some help from the government. They organized themselves to fight back. The silver issue was a big issue during this time. Farmers wanted the United States to be on a silver standard, which meant that there would be more silver dollars produced and paper dollars backed by silver. Because there seemed to be an abundant supply of silver in America. There had been the Comstock lode had produced one of the biggest silver strikes in the U.S., along with other silver strikes in other parts of the West. The crime of 73 for farmers is when the government stopped coining silver. Um, a lot of the farmers believed that this was going to make it even tougher to get a loan. There was a money shortage. The Brand-Allison Act of 1878 limited the silver coinage from 2 million to 4 million ounces, and this was based on a 16 to 1 ratio, that is 16 ounces of silver for every ounce of gold, and so they wanted to keep that ratio in the Treasury. The Sherman Silver Purchase Act was passed in 1890. It required that the Treasury, in response to these farmers, purchase 4.5 million ounces of silver a month. Unfortunately, this really never took place. Um, Most of the deposits were never in circulation, so this 4.5 million ounces of silver never put into coins, never circulated. It was just more or less bars stored by the government. When you see the word agrarian, it is talking about farmers. And so the farmers are going to revolt against government policies and big business. Farmers during this time, you can see, weren't making the money that they needed to make. And that is that the farmers paid more for purchase than they received from their product. And so a lot of farmers were losing their farms, going in the hole. Even though they would work hard and they'd cultivate a number of acres, no matter how much they produced, it seemed like it was a losing battle. The National Grain, or the Patriots of Hubbenstry, was formed in the West, also called the Grange. In fact, this organization still exists in some of the western states. Uh, Initially, it was a way for farmers to get together socially and have parties and picnics and lectures. It also uh, educated farmers on how to be a better farmer. Um, by 1875, there were about 800,000 people part of the Grange movement, and this was mostly in the Great Plains states. They eventually will establish co-ops where they were, for customers and producers, they will buy things in bulk and sell it in bulk to increase the prices. They pushed for grain elevators. They wanted their products to be able to be stored and purchased at a later date. They sought an end to monopolistic railroad practices, that is, favoring certain businesses and sticking it to the farmers. The Grange movement originally started in 1870s in the Midwest, South, and Texas. Again, set up cooperatives where they would buy and sell things, and there was certainly a social and economic component to their organization. Um, And eventually they will become a political organization pushing for what they called Granger laws, that is, laws that that would help the farmers, particularly reining in the railroads and their abusive practices. Um, it rapidly declined by the late 1870s, and it will be replaced by another organization, which is the Populist Movement. The founder of the Grange movement was Oliver Hudson Kelley. You can see it on this poster card here. The gift of the farmer, the gift of the Grangers, they believe that they uh, provided food for everyone. They worked hard, but they just weren't receiving their rewards. The farmer pays for all, he also grows everything for everyone else. The Granger movement was politically successful in states like Illinois, Wisconsin, Iowa, and Minnesota. And they did have some effect on regulating railroad prices and storage fees within their own states. The Grange laws wanted government control of big businesses for the profit of the people. Munn versus Illinois in 1877, Supreme Court ruled that private property could be regulated by government if it were devoted to the public interest. And this was a victory for the farmers. Many of the Grange laws were poorly written, and eventually most of them are going to be overturned by the High Court. The Wabash case in 1886 was really a blow to the farmers in the Grange movement. Individual states did not have the right to regulate interstate commerce. So if the railroad hauled commerce between two different states, well, it really wasn't up to the state to regulate that. And eventually, this will overturn the Munn versus Illinois law, or ruling by the courts, and big businesses like the railroads will continue to profit at the farmers' expense. Now, the Populist Party, or the People's Party, was formed after the Grange organization lost some of its clout, some of its influence. The Farmers Alliance in the South, this is the first organization that the Populist Party will come out of, was formed in the Midwest and the South to give farmers a voice in government. The Southern Alliance, and then there will be a Northern Alliance. The Southern Alliance never allowed black farmers in. Northern Alliance will be a little bit more sympathetic to black farmers, and they will be allowed to join. And again, this was built on the ashes of the Grange movement. Most political and less social than the Grange ran candidates for office, and they're going to be very successful in the West in terms of electing congressmen. They'll never be able to elect a president. They will always be a third party in American politics. At one time, they controlled 8 state legislatures, and they had 47 representatives in Congress in the 1890s. So this is a pretty significant number of congressmen. One of its mottos was, "United we stand, divided we fall." In 1889, both the Northern and the Southern Alliance merged into one, and they called it the Farmers Alliance. Like the Grangers, they did sponsor social events, cooperatives, and they certainly were looking for political relief from railroads and manufacturers. At one time in the 1889, towards the height of this organization, there were 3 million people involved, and these are primarily farmers. They wanted a sub-treasury plan which would give them the opportunity to store their crops in silos and borrow against it from the government. They were hoping that the sub-treasury would allow them to borrow up to 80% of the value of the crops with a modest interest and fees for doing so. One of the problems for farmers is they're flush at the time of harvest because they sell their crops, but other parts of the year there is a cash flow problem. Did this sub-treasury plan ever come into effect? No. There just weren't enough votes in Congress for this to happen. But this was one of the things that the Farmers Alliance was pushing. They will always be against what they call the Eastern Establishment. And by the way, these two words are the secret words for this video. Really, this represented the corporation, the banks who were, and politicians who were fighting against them. And they'll see them as their enemies. The People's Party of the Populist Party is formed, merged in early 1880s through the Farmers Alliance. Started in Topeka, Kansas, is where this party gets started, and it's built on the foundation of the Farmers Alliance. Ignatius Donnelly was elected 3 times to Congress, and he was from the Populist Party. Mary Elise, somebody you might need to know, gave a lot of speeches denouncing the Eastern Establishment, those rich corporation bankers who were trying to always gouge the farmers. In 1880, they had a by-election. This is not necessarily when the president is elected, but they will put some things together for their platform. One of their aims was to control the Democratic Party. The Northern Alliance ran a third-party candidate during this election, or the elections. In 1892, 800 met in St. Louis, Missouri. Majority were Alliance members. Over 100 African Americans were allowed to come to the convention. As far as representatives, they represented labor organizations and reformers. The Grange movement, there was still a remnant of that still existing, and the Greenback Party, which wanted to have more paper circulation of money. And of course, the two Democratic Party and the Republican Party looked upon the People's Party as a platform of lunacy. These are just crazy people, way out there. They were asking for too many things, and it just wasn't going to happen. Of course, we talked about Mary Elise. Once said, Kansas should raise less corn and raise more hell. Sockless Joe Simpson, along with Lease, traveled and tried to drum up support to get the Southern Alliance to support the Populist Party. Pitchfork Ben Tillman, a Democrat, used the Southern Alliance to gain the governor's post in South Carolina, and he will push the blacks out of the state convention. Blacks will be pushed out of the Populist Party. The struggle will become lower class versus the upper white class, and so that's how this will hurt the Populist Party, because a lot of these black voters will never support him, and also farmers in the South never really buy into the Populist Party, which was also going to hurt them. And we're going to stop there.